Okay, welcome to part 2 of Project Brake Caliper. Now what we're going to do today is just we'll put this back together, reassemble everything in the right order and make sure that it's working. A couple of little tips, going to have a little chat about brake fluid as well, so that you know a little bit more about brake and clutch fluid and what we do with it and why we use that and not something different, and how to put this back together quite simply. Okay, so the first task, quite simply, is to put the seals. These are the new seals. We've got one 34mm and one 30mm in each half. So you've got a bigger piston and a smaller piston. You can see the difference in size. The reason for that is you've got a leading piston and a trailing piston, and one does more work than the other, just a design thing. So we take one small one. These big fat ones, these are the seals themselves. They do the actual job of sealing. There. Now, the easiest way to do this, it is virtually impossible to look at them and see which edge the flange is on. Remember in the last one we spoke about the little flange that holds on the inside. It's almost impossible to see which that is by looking at them. Anyway, is to pop them in like that, so they're in the hole, and then feel. Can you feel that bit? Feel the little lip. So you get the little lip on the inside there, that's correct. I've also set these up in the right way around. With a bigger one, just squeeze it in, goes into its little gap. Don't use any oil. I can't stress this enough. Anything other than brake fluid in here is a contaminant. You must not contaminate your brakes. Okay, so there's all the new seals fitted into these spotlessly clean casings. Now all I would suggest when you do this is that, for common sense sake, use a little bit of brake fluid round the piston to lubricate them into place. Big ones. Now, obviously, pop them in, and once it's in place, make sure you push it all the way down. There's a reason for that. Obviously, the cavity behind there, that cavity is where the fluid goes in and pushes the piston forward. So if you put your piston in when you're reassembling, he looked quickly for a clean cloth. When you put it in and you only leave it on the surface, imagine there's air behind there. So when you start to try and bleed these, you've got a big portion of air in the back of the piston. So to eliminate that, when you put the pistons in, make sure they go in right to the back, and make sure as well that they go down smoothly and that there's no resistance. If you try and put the pistons in and they resist and they're not going in, then they're obviously going to jam when you try and use them. A little bit of brake fluid around it, and just line it up dead straight, nice and straight. Sometimes it takes a little bit of rotation. Pop it past the dust seal and then push it all the way down. We are all clean. New seals, everything's spotless. We're now going to put the two halves together. Now you've got a rubber seal here and here, and they go together, and what their job is to stop that leaking, because the fluid flows between the two halves through those little oil ways there. When you put them together, they won't feel like they go together initially. Just hold them in place and then pop your bolts in gently. Just quick, another thing again, these bolts don't need any Loctite. Don't go putting Loctite on them, it's not necessary. I've never needed to do it and they've never leaked. If they leak, you've got a problem with the seals, nothing to do with how tight they are, and tightening them up ever increasingly will just strip them. It won't actually make the thing seal. You need to replace the seals if there's a problem with that. So just do these up loosely, because we're not going to knock them tight until we get it back on the bike. Just nip them gently. Don't go leaning on them yet. We'll do that in a minute. And there you are. One rebuilt brake caliper. Let's put it back on the bike. Right, pads back in. Just before I put the pads back in, I want to show you, this is the inside pad where you can see where it's rubbing on the outside, but it wasn't rubbing there, and effectively that was the problem. They weren't rubbing evenly at all. and that side wasn't rubbing and the inside was. It was actually twisting the disc. So we've now remedied that. Pads back in. This particular caliper, they just drop in underneath. Now it's perfectly okay to have a little bit of brake fluid on the outside of the caliper, but not on the face of the pads. Little spring clip on your bandit. Now I'm not really going to get too involved in how to fit pads. We've done all that the other day. This is about the seals. Put the pin back through, and that's now ready to go back on the bike. Okay, banjo. Back in. Now I would always recommend, after you've done a job like this, actually jet wash this. Get the power washer on it and get all this brake fluid off and clean. But just for now we'll pop it back in. Remember, those pistons are right back out of the way. So that should just float on there really nicely. Bolts back in. Now we shouldn't have lost any more fluid from the system than was in this and went into the cloth there. So it shouldn't be too difficult to bleed this up. Right, again, no need to lean on them. Just do them up and we spot them like we said before. So that's it, caliper in place, everything's there. We now need a little diddy spanner to undo the bleed nipple. Little plastic tube on the end, and then we open the reservoir. Now up here, screwdriver waiting, take the lid off your reservoir, we're ready now to bleed up the front thing. Cap off. You get a rubber gasket inside there that will definitely have done that. It'll do this popping out business because that's what it's there for. It seals and that gets sucked down when you pull it all out. Okay, the principle of bleeding up an empty caliper: pump a few times on the lever and that builds the air pressure up slightly. You get little bubbles coming out the top, and as the fluid goes down, and then hold the lever in, holding the pressure in the system, and then just release the bleed nipple and you'll hear crack, little gurgle. And all that is the air gurgling out the system. There won't be any in there yet, it'll take a few minutes. Gurgle, gurgle. So all we're doing is we're holding the pressure. You can hear that bubbling. If you look in here close, man, a little bit of fluid coming out now. Okay, holding it in, and then it's release and do it back up, and in that time you're squeezing out any air. There we are, there's air bubbles and fluid. Now if fluid's coming out, that's good, but it doesn't want air in it. And all I've done is, just because I'm cack-handed, chuck that through the chain so that drains into the jar, and it's now, there's now fluid all in there. Ooh. Now as you go through, I've pumped probably one reservoir here through. Don't let it run out, because obviously then you're pumping air down into the system and you're undoing all your work. So just keep it topped up with a little bit more fluid each time. Two or three pumps, hold it in, and that will then pop out. And when we're looking in here, there's loads of tiny little air bubbles, little tiny microscopic air bubbles that we need to get out. Pumping it up, build up the pressure, release it through. You can hear the little gurgles of air coming out of the piston, out of the caliper. They just keep going until it's all gone. Right, so there we go. That's the end of part 2, and that's how to replace or rebuild a full brake caliper with 4 pistons. And it will be the same anatomy for 6 pistons or even 8 if you've got such a thing. And the most important thing here is that that was £11 to buy those seals off the internet. That's it, £11. And I think it was about £5 for the fluid. That's it. You're looking at less than £20 to do that job. If you use that to a dealer, they would probably charge you 2 hours, I would think, or maybe even longer. It depends how long they want to take over it and how bad they are. And if you imagine your average dealers, whatever they might charge, just times that by 2 or 4, you can see that job could add up really expensively. And it's something you do yourself. It's not complex, it's just housekeeping. And I want you to get out there and have a little look at your brakes, spin that wheel, make sure it's not binding too much, let the brakes on and off, and just keep a note of it. Keep a mind on it, and if it is, give them a refurb. Doesn't cost a lot, doesn't take long, and it gets you back in touch with your bike. So there we go. Thanks for tuning in and watching Delboy's Garage. Always appreciate the comments and all of your fantastic support. Take it easy, ride safe, let's all make it through the winter. See you next time.